This slot is entitled Family Time. I'm pleased with my increasing age that I am no longer anywhere near the youngest in the congregation. So this is family time for you. What I wanted to do was to give an example of absolute fear on the water. Now, you won't be surprised to hear that this is one of my experiences, one of many, I have to admit. But I'd like to tell you about one such time, and I can't remember the exact date, but I think it was around the turn of the century, year 2000. And Judith and I went to Wales for a few days' holiday, and we visited, intentionally, one of the best windsurfing sites for intermediate windsurfers in Wales, Dale in Pembrokeshire. And if we can see the first slide, you should be able to see Dale on the map. That's where the little red arrow is pointing to Dale. And if we go on to the next slide, it is somewhat more magnified, I think. And it's the orange arrow, which actually points to a car park in Dale, and that's the windsurfing bay. And if you want to see it in a picture on the next slide, there is the very pretty natural harbour that Dale forms. And that could be a picture of Judith sitting with her mother Audrey, but it isn't. It's two random people from the internet. So that's very close to the car park where we drove in, and Judith probably sat in that seat while I was off windsurfing. And I'd been windsurfing most of the day, and it was a glorious day. The winds were about force 3 to 4, gusting 5. Now, for those of you who don't know the Beaufort scale, it's the next slide, which is not very clear, I don't think. I don't know whether you can see it. But 3 to 4 is a wind speed of between 8 and 18 miles an hour. And a windsurf board can generally go twice or 3 times the speed of the wind. So with a wind of force 4, you can easily get to 30 knots, which is quite fast on a windsurf board. But it was also gusting to almost 25 miles an hour. At the end of the afternoon, I decided that it would be good to sail to the next bay. So we packed everything in the car, apart from me and the windsurf board, and Judith drove round to the next bay, which is about a mile up the coast. I think the next slide shows where it was. It's the red arrow, so that little road that goes by the coast, that's where Judith drove, and I was going to sail around that outcrop, out of the harbour, into what is, I think, Milford, not Milford Sound, it's the Milford Haven. It's only about a mile, which at the speeds I was doing should take 15 minutes or less. And I don't think, despite being quite strong winds, I hadn't fallen off the board once the whole time that afternoon. And then I was sailing round, and as soon as I got beyond that peak, the winds increased in strength. They came to from a 3 to 4 to a 5 to 6, and gusting 7. And 7 is the definition of a gale. So force 7, it becomes a gale. I vividly remember hardly being able to stand up on the board, getting tossed off time and time again. I then climbed up on the board for what was going to be the last time, thinking, I am exhausted, I can't do this anymore. I knelt on the board, I said a prayer, and I determined that the next time I was thrown off the board, I was going to abandon it because I was being blown out to sea, and I wanted to start swimming whilst I could still see the shore. I hauled up the sail and miraculously sailed non-stop onto the beach. When I got to the beach, I dragged the board up the beach and collapsed on the beach, exhausted. I then looked up to see Judith sitting in the car. She looked up at me, smiled sweetly, and then got on with her tapestry. So I've given this story for two reasons. One is to give a modern example of the danger of sailing and of sudden high winds and the fear that it can instill. But secondly, and probably more importantly, to remind us not to rely on our own strength. Remember that Christ is always with you, even if you don't recognize it. So let us listen and perhaps even hum to our next hymn, which is from Rejoice and Sing number 635, Put Peace into Each Other's Hands. And this is a lovely Fred Kahn hymn which resonates with the words that we've heard from Corinthians.